Fifth season. This is the fifth year of the Happy Program Seminar Series, and we're happy to have everybody here today. I'm going to do a brief introduction of the program and tell you what's going to happen today, and then Hallie's going to step in and do a formal introduction of our speaker, who most of you know. We're very happy to have her here, but I'll wait for Hallie to tell you about her. So the Health in the Public Interest Program is a one-year MS at Georgetown University that emphasizes the non-clinical factors that affect people's health and healthcare, specifically social determinants of health and economic, political, etc. So cultural, everything that affects health that you might not think about when you go to see a physician. And many believe that those things are just as important or more important as some of the things that happen in what we usually think of as healthcare. So if you're interested in our program, Liz, could you put the website in the chat? Feel free to go and have a look at what else is going on in our program. So in the presentation today, we're going to start with Hallie doing a formal introduction, followed by a presentation by Dr. Golding, and she'll go for about 45 minutes, followed by Q&A and discussion. We'll start first with discussion and questions from our seminar students, and then followed up with the general audience. We'll start out with everybody's mics muted, and we may at some point open them up if Lenette wants to have feedback during the talk. So Hallie, it's your turn.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Hello, happy friends and guests. So I'll go ahead and introduce Professor Golding. As many of you already know, Professor Golding is an adjunct professor at Georgetown and teaches a course on health communication for the Happy program. She works with teams at Save the Children as well on strategic communication strategies to help people connect across differences and stimulate collaboration. So during the seminar, Professor Golding will share how a little focused effort can make almost any message a little more engaging and more likely to make a difference. I'll also share just a note from a colleague about Dr. Golding. Dr. Golding's powerful combination of education, experience, and expertise enable her to design and implement complex efforts effectively and efficiently. Her people skills are stellar, as is her sense of humor. Lenette is passionate about her work and thoughtfully innovative. All of these qualities result in dynamic portfolio management skills and the ability to produce timely results. So with that, we're pumped to have you, Professor Golding, and I'll let you take it away.
Thank you so much for that warm welcome. And so happy to be here with everyone. I will just start by saying my day-to-day life spans public health practice and research and teaching. And in all three areas, it is really essential that I'm able to diplomatically and clearly and logically convey information and ideas through a variety of ways. To individuals and to groups, and really in a manner that engages them. So today I'm going to share some of the strategies and tips that I have acquired along the way, and hopefully get you thinking how you can get your ideas across in an engaging way. So we'll start off with the next slide. All right. I will say that I'm sure all of you have had the experience of trying to communicate with someone and them totally not getting what you're saying, or not being interested in listening to, what you have to say. What public health professionals have to say is incredibly important, but so is how we say it. And 50 years of social, cognitive, and behavioral science shows that how we position messages matters. The choices we make in how we communicate information can be the difference between an idea that really cuts through and changes the conversation and one that just gets swallowed up or bounces back or rejected outright. Next slide, please. There you go, the paragraph. Yep. So today we're going to start by playing a game of Would You Rather. Not in the sense of would you rather be 11 feet tall or 9 inches tall, but rather which of these versions of this message would compel you to act? So here's the situation. Each year, more than 1 million children in countries around the world die from dehydration caused by diarrhea. And this problem can be prevented at a very low cost by getting kids the right kind of fluids. So how would you get people invested in this idea? On the screen, you're going to see an explanation from an international non-governmental organization that addresses health problems in developing countries. So it starts, diarrhea is one of the leading killers of young children in developing countries, causing 1.5 million child deaths annually. Diarrhea itself is not the cause of death, but rather dehydration, the loss of body fluid. Approximately 3/4 of the body is composed of water, and if fluid loss exceeds So you can read the rest of the screen. Right. After reading this, how solvable do you think this problem is? Suppose you were a health official in a developing country, and what would you do tomorrow to start saving kids' lives? Now, to be fair, this message appears on the organization's webpage that describes the organization and what it's been doing to solve this problem. And the text doesn't necessarily reflect how the organization might approach decision makers to persuade them to act. The information is written in a language that creates credibility. And there's a lot of scientific language and explanation there. My point on this and why I'm showing you the slide is that if a problem sounds too complex, it can really discourage people from trying to solve it. So next slide, please. So message 2, same issue, kids dying from diarrhea, dehydration from diarrhea. This is a message from James Grant, who was the director of UNICEF for many years, and Grant always traveled with a packet filled with 1 teaspoon of salt and 8 teaspoons of sugar. This is the ingredients for oral rehydration therapy. And when mixed with a liter of water, it creates this ORT. So he would go and he would meet with prime ministers and health officials in countries, and he would take out his packet of salt and sugar and say, do you know what costs less than a cup of tea, and it can save hundreds of thousands of children's lives in your country? Right? So that's how he would start this conversation. So quick, think about this. How solvable is this problem, right? If you were that prime minister or the health official, what would you do tomorrow to start saving these children's lives? So Grant's message really brings you to the table. It helps you bring your knowledge to bear. Maybe you're brainstorming ways to get that salt and sugar packet to schools, to hospitals, to clinics, to parents. Maybe you're thinking about campaigns to teach mothers, the right ratio of salt and sugar. Now, Grant was clearly a master of getting ideas to stick, and he brought out a very concrete prop, and he starts with a very attention-grabbing, unexpected contrast. This packet costs less than a cup of tea, but it can have a real impact. So prime ministers would spend, they spend their time thinking about very elaborate, complex social problems, building infrastructure, constructing hospitals, maintaining healthy environment. And suddenly, here's this bag of salt and sugar that can save hundreds of thousands of children, right? So Grant's message does sacrifice the science and the statistics. It does add credibility to that first, the science and the statistics might add that credibility, but he was the director of UNICEF and he had enough credibility to keep people from questioning his facts. So Grant left really uncontested the factual battle behind and really fought the motivational battle. So here, a prop worked better than a scientific description. So next slide. So back in 2007, Chip and Dan Heath published a book that I tell people about all the time. It's one of my favorites. It's called Made to Stick. And if you're in my class, it's on Canvas, ready for you to read. But the book opens up with an example and a quote from Mark Twain. Twain said that a lie can get halfway around the world before the truth even gets its boots on. And really, Twain's observation rings true. Urban legends, conspiracy theories, bogus health scares, they circulate effortlessly. Meanwhile, folks like us struggle getting people to pay attention to what we have to say, even when it's based on science, right? So the thing I really like about this book is that they use a formula, and I'm going to walk us through that formula. You can see it here on the screen. And it starts out with ensuring that your communication, your messaging is simple. So the more we can reduce the amount of information in an idea, the stickier it's going to be. Rarely will you get the advice to make your communication lengthy and convoluted, unless, of course, you're writing interest rate disclosures for a credit card company. So it's not, if you're trying to get malnourished kids, nourishment, you wouldn't say something like, to help mothers with malnourished children in some areas, a special supplement has been prepared, which they can feed to the child and which will make the child's diet better, and it will start him on the recovery while he gets used to the diet. It's taught to the mother, right? That's convoluted, and there's a lot of stuff going on there. How about instead saying, malnourished children need a better diet, and we must teach mothers how to feed them a better diet, right? So it's simple. So think sentences, not paragraphs. Easy words instead of hard words. Proverbs, short sentences drawn from a long experience. I mean, think of the golden rule, right? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. You could spend your whole life thinking about just that proverb. And the point being is that when you say a lot of things, you say nothing. And a trick to making ideas simple is by tapping into people's already existing memories. You can make it easier for people to learn a new concept by really associating it with a concept they already know. So for instance, effective latch-on is central to comfortable and efficient breastfeeding, when the baby latches onto the breast. And since breastfeeding involves the baby taking a large mouthful of an even larger object, a latch-on teaching model based on bottle feeding or just suction alone is inappropriate. So a model that I use a lot when I'm working with moms or with teachers is, or different adults, is coming at it like you're trying to eat something really big, so in the US that might be a sandwich or a hamburger, something culturally appropriate to the context. It makes it possible to understand the message because it invokes concepts that adults already know. So imagine taking a really big, that first bite of a hamburger, right? That's latch on. And I have to apologize. I have a puppy who's playing in the other room. So if you hear squeaking, that's what that is. Now, the second ingredient in this formula is to keep things unexpected. So something that is unexpected, it really violates what we know to be true. And surprise will jolt us to attention because what we thought was going to happen didn't, and now we have to try and understand why. So surprise is the opposite of predictability. And unexpected ideas likely stick because surprise makes us pay attention and think. So here's an example. The American public, in a recent poll, believes that the US spends a great deal more money on aid to other countries than it actually does. The poll suggests that most Americans think the federal government spends about 10 to 15% of its budget on foreign aid. Do you know how much we actually spend? The truth is that the US spends less than 1%, the lowest of any industrialized nation. And all of sub-Saharan Africa received just over 1 billion in economic aid. And that's really low. Okay, so let me frame that statement so that it comes out in an unexpected way. So if everyone in the US gave up one soft drink a month, we could double our current aid to sub-Saharan Africa. And if everyone gave up one movie a year, we could double our current aid to Africa and Asia, right? So using unexpected element there. Next slide. So the third part of Made to Sticks model is about making things concrete. So here's a sentence that basically is unintelligible to most people, but one that I hear a lot, I've heard a lot recently. It says, humans must mitigate global warming by pursuing an unprecedented transition to a carbon neutral economy. Now, a recent study found that some of the most common terms in climate science are confusing to the general public. The study tested words that are frequently used in international climate reports and concluded that the most confusing terms were mitigation, carbon neutral, and unprecedented transition. So, for example, participants in this study, they mixed up words about mitigation, which commonly refers to efforts that reduce greenhouse gas emissions, with words like mediation, which is a way to resolve disputes. And even a simple term like carbon can be misleading. The study found that sometimes, carbon can be shorthand for carbon dioxide. Other times it could be used to refer to multiple greenhouse gases. So as experts in a particular field, we may not realize which words that we're using are jargon to people. So the solution is to avoid jargon completely and instead think about how to make your ideas concrete. Concrete, vivid details boost credibility. Point out details that are meaningful and symbolize and support your core ideas. Statistics can be less engaging than concrete, vivid details. Statistics really are rarely meaningful and in and of themselves. Statistics will and should almost be used to illustrate a relationship, right? It's more important for people to remember the relationship than the actual number. So provide a human context when you can for the statistics. It's going to create a sense of drama. And when we use statistics, the less we really rely on actual numbers, the better. The numbers inform us about the underlying relationship, right? So, but there's better ways to illustrate that underlying relationship than the numbers themselves. And we're going to talk about numbers here in just a little bit. But, you know, for us, for experts, people who have our heads in these, you know, complex social problems, we slip so easily into abstraction, and we forget that other people don't know what we know, right? And the reason's simple. The differences between an expert and a novice is the ability to think abstractly. Experts have spent years learning details and thinking about things at a higher level. And for experts, it can be really unnatural to speak concretely about a subject matter because you can talk about it in the abstract form. But if we experts are willing just to make a little bit of an effort, we can really see rewards. And our audience is going to understand what we're trying to say and remember it. And the trick really is finding language, you know, using the words that everyone knows. Concreteness is about creating a shared land on which people can collaborate. So the ORS example that I shared with you is how to make a message concrete. The fourth ingredient in the made to stick formula is about bringing credibility to your communication. And I want you to think about why you believe some of the things that you do. We believe because our parents or friends believe something. We believe because we've had experiences that lead us to our beliefs. We believe because our religious faith. We believe because we trust authorities. And all of these things are powerful forces. Family, personal experience, faith. We find authorities credible because they have degrees or experiences that we don't have. We find celebrities credible because we want to be just like them, right? But don't despair if you're not Nelson Mandela or a popular social influencer on TikTok. Normal, regular folks like you and I, we can have a big impact on people. And telling stories using real people is the most compelling way. A commercial with a celebrity claiming a new shampoo will make your hair, you know, bouncy and shiny, really has less credibility than hearing your friend tell you about that shampoo, you know, and how it made their hair look so nice. The company wants to sell you the shampoo. Your friend, they just, you know, want your hair to look nice, right? So the takeaway is that it can be the honesty and trustworthiness of our sources, not their status, that really allows them to act as authorities. Next slide, please. Another ingredient in this made to stick model is emotional. And researchers really theorize that when we make statistical terms, we shift into more of an analytical frame of mind. When people think analytically, they're less likely to think emotionally. So statistics, in a way, hinders our ability to feel. An emotional idea makes people care. So here's an example from Save the Children, where I work. And think what you will about child sponsorship programs. That's a topic for another day. But here's the example. So donors respond better to individuals in the abstract causes. So you don't have to give to African poverty. You could sponsor a specific child. Imagine yourself the sponsor of Rosa, a little girl in El Salvador. You get sent picture of Rosa and you get to trade letters with her, and you know from her letters that she loves to read and she frequently gets annoyed by her little brother. She's excited that she gets to play football next year on the team, and you know, that's really powerful stuff. So if we want to make people care, we've got to tap into the things that they care about. And what matters to people, people. People matter to people. All right, next slide. The last ingredient in the made to stick formula is to use stories. And stories really impose a sense of order and offer the means by which individuals can organize a host of random emotional and perceptual and physical and social experiences into a meaningful account. It's how we think. We think in stories. And people are able to develop an understanding of the past and predict a future and gain a general understanding of how they should act from stories. Stories are told and retold because they contain wisdom. And stories are effective teaching tools because in part they entertain and in part they can instruct. They really illustrate what happens when people, make bad decisions. They can highlight the unexpected or resourceful ways in which people have solved problems. And stories can really produce mental stimulations. So the mental stimulation, it helps us with problem solving. It helps us think about things that we might otherwise have neglected. And really, mental stimulations also help us anticipate the appropriate responses to future situations. Hearing someone's story isn't like just being there, but it's the next best thing. And the right story can make people act. All right, next slide. So let's think back to that first example I gave you about oral rehydration therapy, right? Message one was that paragraph with the scientific and factual information about ORT. And the second message was that example from James Grant. And if you look down this list of the ingredients of the made to stick model, you can see that the first one, that paragraph, has less components of the ingredients than James Grant's example was with his packet of salt and sugar. All right, next slide. So let's talk numbers because I know we all use them in public health. Oh, is there a question? No? All right. So here's a book by Chip Heath. He's one of the brothers that wrote Made to Stick, and he wrote a book with Carla Starr. Now, I was surprised to find out when I read this book that most languages in the world and throughout history have names for the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But after that, the supply of numbers with names runs dry. I didn't know that. The language has really forced us to resort to a generic word such as lots or many, right? For all those other numbers from 6 up to a billion gazillion. So consider this thought experiment designed really to help people understand the difference between a million and a billion, right? So you and a friend enter a lottery with several prizes, but there's a catch. If you win, you must spend $50,000 of your prize money each day until it runs out. All right. So you could either win $1 million or you could win $1 billion. Either way, you have to spend $50,000 a day. So let's just say you win $1 million and your friend wins the $1 billion. And how long is it going to take each of you to spend your lottery windfall? If you're the millionaire, you are going to go bust in a mere 20 days. Okay. But for your billionaire friends, that money will hold out a lot longer. In fact, they're going to have to spend $50,000 a day for the next 55 years, right? Big difference there, right? But so the whole point of me telling you the story is that we lose information when we don't translate those numbers into instinctive human experience. And our job in public health, we really have ample opportunity to painstakingly work out and generate data to make good decisions. But all that work is wasted if those numbers never take root in the minds of decision makers. So when people don't get a number, they not only miss the number itself, but they also feel more distance from you and your presentation, and they might even tune you out. So with the example, the comparison makes, it's really clear to scale. The scale, oh yeah, let me just tell you that there's this example here on this slide, right? So this comparison really makes it clear the barrier that racism puts up. A white reader can imagine what it would be like to be treated like a felon. It's really a gut punch to realize that in the job market, an applicant would be treated worse, you know, than a felon just for solely being Black. So, yeah, next slide. Here's just some more comparisons. These are directly out of this book. You can see here that list B, much easier to understand. It's easier to retain and easier to repeat. And the info is really functionally the same. You know, anytime we give the audience figures that aren't whole numbers, the message is unlikely to make sense to them. Next slide. Fractions, you can see here, list A compared to list B. You know, fractions really make people do math, and decimals are not concrete. One trick you can use when you're trying to communicate numbers is to try the village of 100 people or the basket of 100, you know, oranges, and convert the percentages to whole numbers, because whole numbers really are easy for the brain to process. And remember, you know, people are really busy and they have a lot to think about. And they want numbers that let them see the big picture, connect the dots, make those relationships that make sense of things, right? Not numbers that require extra chores. So every moment that's spent trying to understand a number, it makes it harder to grasp the bigger picture. And you really want your audience to think about the big picture, not do the math in their heads. Next slide, please. So here's another example I used once in a presentation to a private donor. And I knew a little bit about this private donor, and I knew this donor loved baseball. So keep this in mind, because I was using the Heath brothers formula on this one. So for this presentation, I was talking about maternal mortality, and really there's virtually been no progress in reducing the number of women who die due to pregnancy or childbirth worldwide in recent years. And that's really the conclusion of a new report that was released by the World Health Organization and other United Nations agencies, as well as the World Bank. The report estimates that there were 287,000 maternal deaths globally in 2020. That's the most recent years the statistics cover. Put another way, that's the equivalent, right? This is a way you can make that number make sense to someone. That's the equivalent of a woman dying every 2 minutes, or nearly 800 deaths a day. And that represents only a 7% reduction since 2016, when world leaders committed to the so-called sustainable development goal of slashing maternal mortality rates by more than 1/3 by 2030. And there's probably more deaths, given that the report doesn't capture the likely further setbacks since 2020, resulting from the impacts of the COVID pandemic and the current global economic slowdowns. So I was talking to this donor, how am I going to make this donor really be invested in maternal mortality? Next slide, please. Again, I knew a little bit about this donor. I knew they love baseball. So what I did during my presentation, I was talking about maternal mortality, switched into baseball, something unexpected, and talking about the Nationals Park, you know, and it has, you know, a lot of seats in it. So, well, to make the statistic, next slide, please, about the number of maternal deaths globally in 2020, I talked about how many times the national stadium, you know, could be filled. It could be filled over 7 times with moms, right? So my presentation then went on to talk about all those life-saving interventions that the donor could fund, some easy, some not. And as an aside, we were able to get some money, thankfully. I'm not taking credit. Hopefully I contributed to that decision, I don't know. But anyway, next slide. Okay, so I've given you a lot of examples, but I don't want to, I just want to touch on two other things just briefly. The first is framing. You know, framing refers to the way that we position information, and it can really have an effect on people's perception of an issue. So for example, there was a study in 2004, and it had a representative sample of Americans, and they received the same basic information about a political rally that was scheduled by a hate group. Now, half the people in the sample were told that the rally was about, you know, even though it's a hate group, they should let it go on because it's about the importance of free speech. And the second half were told about the potential danger of having this hate group have this rally. Participants were then asked the same series of questions to determine whether they supported allowing the hate group to hold the rally. And people were asked to think about the importance, the people that were asked to, you know, or given the frame that they should think about the importance of free speech were more than twice as likely to support that rally than those who had read the very same information presented through the lens of potential danger. So here the information was the same, but the way it was framed really shaped people's thinking in a significant way. Next slide, please. And here's another example in a study designed to see how different ways of presenting information about child mental health affects support for public policies. A representative sample of Americans read about a fictitious program that provided support to children and their families. The study participants were randomly assigned to one of three groups. Those assigned to the first group, the control group, they read a program description without any framing whatsoever. The second group read the same information, but was introduced with an appeal to the value of future progress and prosperity, really making the point that supporting children's mental health is important to the future success and the progress of our country. Those in the third group read the same basic program information, but instead of being primed to think about the future progress and prosperity, they were asked to think about the value of vulnerability. The idea that children are among the most vulnerable members of society and they deserve our help, empathy, and compassion. And all the participants then indicated their level of support for an evidence-based child mental health policy. And what do you think the outcome was? Well, those whose description was framed as the value of future progress and prosperity were more than twice as supportive of those policies as those who were asked to think about vulnerability. The framing of the program really affected people's thinking and support for solutions. So, you know, we public health professionals, we tend to focus our messages on the problems and hit hard on urgency. The thinking really behind this approach is that if people can see how dire a particular problem is, they're going to be motivated to engage and address the problem. In fact, sometimes it does the opposite, right? It makes people feel fatalistic. It makes them feel disengaged. And this is why stories that have a positive tone and a solution really can work better. Okay, last slide, I promise. I just wanted to touch briefly on the importance of body language. The importance of body language is that it really assists us in understanding and decoding what the person is saying. And body language also helps interpret other people's moods and emotions. Apart from this, it really enhances our conscious understanding of people's reactions to what we say and how we say it. So if you really want to show someone that you're truly engaged in their conversation without actually saying it, use your body language to do that. Open up your body, language. Use good posture, a healthy amount of eye contact, open hand gestures, and having a bit of a smile on your face can help too. I like to think about Mona Lisa when I give my presentation. So, it's that little smile on my face. Okay, last slide is just to thank you for listening to me ramble on for the past 40 or so minutes. And I think we are now gonna open it up for conversation.
Yes, I was going to say, if anybody has any questions to start, I have some as well for Professor Golding, but I'll let happy students start with questions. Is
So
that right? Sorry.
while people are formulating questions, let me throw something up there, Lenette. So where do sort of ethics and sensibility around what's fair or effective long-term in terms of, evoking people's emotions, and you get what I'm asking, right? Is there an ethical component to all of this?
Yeah, I started hearing about the P word early in college when I was in social psychology classes. Persuasion gets a really bad rap. One of my professors is a renowned social psychologist, Bob Cialdini. In fact, he was just in NPR today. He had a little thing on NPR today about some advice he had been given about his career. But he introduced me to the word persuasion, and it gets a really bad rap. And so that's why I call it the P word. Ethics always, what you're doing and how you're trying to communicate with people and your motives. I think, when I'm trying to communicate, I'm trying to be transparent, and I'm trying to build a relationship and build trust and collaboration. Anything you are trying to do could be used for bad purposes, right? But I think as professionals, is the onus is on us to be transparent with our motives right from the get-go. Any donor, obviously, that's coming to save the children, any presentation I'm giving to a donor, they know what my motive is. I'm trying to get money, right, for our programming. But yeah, I think that's a really excellent question, Adam. In the chat. Oh yeah, Bob Cialdini about persuasion. Oh yeah, the hidden brain one. Yeah, he's a really he has a great book too that you might be interested in, Influence. I think I don't know how many millions of copies of his book, Influence. It's a really great book. And I was fortunate enough to be a student at Arizona State University and take a class from him. Yeah.
One question I had, Professor Golding, just specifically in regards to how the nature of our post-pandemic world being highly virtual and virtual health solutions, and how that will impact communication engagement strategies, especially given, as you mentioned, that digital health solutions are growing, or as you mentioned, that body language is so important to sort of effectively communicating and connecting and creating empathy. along with the fact that digital health solutions are increasing.
Yeah, I think, even with digital health, these same, if you think about the made to stick model, can definitely transfer over even to a digital health arena, right? Keeping messages simple, concrete, unexpected, credible, right? In a story format can really help people understand messaging. So I think even if you're using a digital format, you can do that. Even with this presentation, I tried to use some of those same principles, giving stories, trying to make it emotional, right? So yeah, I think it can transfer. Come on, it's your time to try and stump me.
Oh, I don't think this will stump you, but I do have a question on, like we were talking about the first example versus the second, and I feel like I feel like right now it's hard to do both. Like you're never going to make both people happy. Like if you post the shorter one, they're like, well, what about X, Y, and Z? And I feel like that's just kind of right now where we are. And like, do you think it's important to have two separate teams, or do you think that these kinds of messages should come from, I guess, developed by one team of people who can do both the long form technical and the shorthand, or if that takes two different types of people?
I think it takes an incredible communicator to do both. And that's why I made the point about it's really hard for experts to understand what people don't know, right? Another example of that the Heath brothers put in this book, Made to Stick, is called The Curse of Knowledge. And there's an example of an experiment. Psychology doctoral student had a for their dissertation did this experiment where they had tappers and listeners. So the tappers would tap out a song on a table, da, 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 all right? And the listeners would have to guess what song they were tapping out. And I forget the number, but it was really low. Like the listeners guess the wrong song the majority of the time. I forget, it was really low.
It was like 2%.
Yeah, it was, Brian, you read the book.
I read an article. I did not read the book.
Oh, okay. All right. And what the tappers, what this was alluding to is in the curse of knowledge is experts have a whole orchestra in their head. They have the drums, they have the sax, they have everything in their head. They can play the melody, they hear the lyrics, they can hear everything, right? The listeners, like the novice, all they hear is just some random taps. They don't have all the extra everything in their head. And I think for experts, we can sometimes hear the orchestra and our audience just hears, sorry, dog's going bananas. Our audience, all they hear are random taps. So to answer your question, Ella, in a long, convoluted way, I think if you're a good communicator, even an expert, it's being able to simplify, right? Make your messages concrete. It takes effort for sure, because it's really easy for us just to spout off scientific jargon and numbers and whatever. So I think you can do both. Yeah. All right.
I have a question.
Yeah.
My main interests are in awareness and in addressing stigma around mental health. And that's, I know, like you're saying, it's one of those places where I think that awareness has can be really sensitive. Or it is one of the places where awareness, I feel like, is more likely to go wrong. and create more problems. And so with that, what would be like the top maybe things to consider when it comes to developing mental health campaigns that don't end up having the opposite effect as what we want?
Yeah. One of the things I said during the presentation is that, people care about people. They do. And stories really work. They work to help us think, right? That's what I had on the slide. To perceive, to think, and feel at the same time. What instantly comes to my head is the progress we have made as a society, even though sometimes it doesn't feel like it, for LGBTQ populations and the stigma that they've faced. If you look where we started, like even 1960s, 1970s to where we are today, there has been progress, sometimes slower, sometimes faster, depending on all sorts of different factors. But the one thing that I think has really helped make that progress is entertainment and interjecting stories of real people into the media. It's helped create dialogue among people, and that conversation between people about social issues is worth its weight in gold. If you could put a pound or a weight to conversation, right? And I think the same thing with mental health. It's getting a lot more attention now in the media, telling stories about real people facing real problems, sometimes getting the help that they need, sometimes not, right? And the effect that it's having on people's lives. So, stigma is never an easy thing to tackle. But I think if you can show positive ways forward and solutions and get people talking about that, that is definitely a foot in the right direction of social change.
Just one follow-up then. Do you think that the paradoxical effects are more likely as you're starting to raise awareness, but as awareness is spreading, then that it's more likely to have a positive effect?
It can, for sure. Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you.
No, you're welcome. I don't know if I answered your question, but yeah.
I think it kind of answered it, and it just sparked a thought in my head that based on what you're saying, that it sounds like that as things progress, that kind of gap closes as well. That it sounds like as awareness catches on, it's less likely to be problematic.
Yeah, and really, when discussions happen with people could have that ability to open up and be vulnerable and to discuss social situations. That's when the real magic hits, when that really can create change. So much of my work is creating entertainment education, working on community radio. You heard Ryan last night talk about community radio and other, television spots and things of that nature. And it's that mass media is important, and it can help, but really the magic and where the rubber meets the road is when people start talking about it. So.
Well, I actually just got this book that you may have already read, but it's just kind of about that. It's called Contagious: Why Things Catch On.
Oh, no, I haven't seen that book.
Yeah, and the author actually talks about Bob Cialdini's book on persuasion, or no, sorry, not Bob Cialdini's, the Heath Brothers book, to Make It Stick, but talks about how it kind of is a good pairing because his book is about how to make ideas contagious. And whereas that one is more about how to then maintain them. And so kind of a nice pairing there.
I'm going to check it out. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think we can go ahead and open up questions to guests as well. So for anyone that has a question, go ahead. And if not, I can also jump in with, because I have many questions, but one thing that I wanted to ask Professor Golding as well is just by nature, I know how storytelling in general, how we've chatted about how it holds power and connection and vulnerability, unlike sort of any other narrative. So would you mind sharing some examples from your experience, either like within your portfolio management or at the programmatic scale, when storytelling has had this significant impact?
Boy, you stumped me. I'm like, I had one example in my head and then it went a different way.
And if you can't think of that, maybe just like general skill sets that
I can think of it. So working on a water sanitation hygiene project, the donor really wanted us to get pit latrines built in the community, and the community wasn't so excited about it. And we had many community meetings with them to talk about, you know, the value of pit latrines, and there was a lot of open defecation and whatnot. Working with the community, we found out what they really wanted. Well, what the men really wanted was a soccer field for their community. And so, long story short, we helped them get that soccer field built. We taught them about funding and all this other stuff. Long story, it was a long drawn out process, many years. So they finally got the soccer field built. Then what we found out subsequently, an unintended consequence, a good one, thankfully, was that the rate of gender-based violence really decreased in that community, because the men, the perpetrators, were either on the soccer field or coming back from the soccer field and were too tired to engage in GBV. So what we ended up doing, we thought it was just a golden moment then, and we ended up putting out community. We did a campaign on gender-based violence. We thought, you know, now is this the perfect time for it, given that the rates have gone down, and maybe people will be more receptive to discussing it. So we put out a short 3-series radio novella on GBV, and then also went to the same community to have community discussions, and people really started to talk about it. And then I left the project, so I don't know what happened after that, but yeah, that's one long drawn out example.
So if there aren't any other questions, let me throw, I don't like to ask too many questions, obviously, but you know, if there's a gap, there are always things I want to know about. So you've talked a lot about how to make the communication effective. We touched a little bit on my first question about ethics, but from the public standpoint, you know, so there are tools now, you know, along with like media reports, et cetera, that allow us to understand a little bit about the legitimacy of NGOs and charitable organizations, about you know, the percentages of money that goes where it should, the accountability, the leadership of those organizations, et cetera. But the one piece that I struggle with is like the efficacy issue. So, you know, there's a lot of efforts that seem to center around cool ideas, you know, like let's give seed money to people in poor places to do their little businesses, not pejoratively little, but they are little.
Yeah.
Or let's give them particular tools or, you know, whatever. I don't want to get too specific here, or,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
Where do we get that kind of communication from reliably, or information? It's a little far afield for you. I know you're working on the other end, how to get our message across, but part of that message ought to be, and I suppose it is, how effective we are, right?
So Adam, is your question?
How does the public get information on the efficacy of, you know, the money that they're spending, the gifts that they're giving?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I can tell you, you know, Save the Children US, for instance, our major donor is USAID. And so we are beholden, if we get a grant from USAID, we are beholden to the American public to report on our findings. Any project we do, we're going to have to do formative research. We're going to do a baseline survey and a midterm and an endline survey. Those are just the givens. On top of that, we might be doing, you know, a gender and power analysis and all sorts of complexity aware adaptive management monitoring. And then at the end, because we want to get more funding, we always want to make ourselves look good, right? So we'll put together kind of an end of project list of publications. And that's how these things get reported out to the likes of USAID. Some of our other donors have different requirements of us. A lot of, we've had people from Congress go out to our sites to kind of get a taste and feel of what our work is like in the field. And, you know, we always want to kind of shine a light, I think, on at least Save the Children. And I think more and more international non-governmental organizations are trying to shine a light on things that don't work. You know, we need to be real. There are things that we do that do not work, and interventions. And as practitioners, you know, sometimes that gets glossed over because people are chasing the money and they want to make themselves look good.
Right.
But I think people are getting a little bit more real with also shining the light on the things that don't work. I don't know if I answered your question or not.
No, you absolutely did. Just a comment that as much as shining a light on things that don't work is important. I think what gets into the press and people's heads is the corruption as opposed to the inefficacy, right? So corruption is easy to incorporate into one's thinking about where to be effective in making donations or supporting causes. But yeah, I mean, everybody should do what you all are doing and be beholden to their sponsors or donors to report back, right? To show that, you know, if you put your clothing in a box, or, you know, send a gift every month that's going to do ABC, you know, like that, something really happens, right? And there's been some amazing problems in some of those areas.
Yeah, absolutely. And John, I see your hand up. I will just say, larger INGOs, and actually some smaller ones too. There's something called Charity Navigator, and they have a whole list of criteria that they will rate an organization on. So
Yeah,
do homework.
I look at that, but the one piece that's a little harder to pull out of that even is like, you know, I mean, they want to know the main things are, do they file their tax returns? Do they, you know, have decent stability? Do they give 80% of their money to the cause? That, you know, that kind of thing, which is very important. I agree. But anyway, I see we have a hand up.
Yeah, John. Yeah.
Hey, thank you. Thank you so much for this presentation. I'm wondering, I'd like to pick your brain about public service announcements and or earned media.
Uh-huh.
Is there a fee? Do charitable organizations have to pay a fee to have their public service announcements broadcast on commercial television?
Most likely, yes. Sometimes it depends on the network and the time of day. Sometimes you can get some free media, you know, it's their act of charity, but they'll give you like a free spot at 3 a.m. or whatever for your PSA. A lot of the PSAs get put onto social media because there's not a cost associated with it. Radio is a lot cheaper, and you can also get free airtime on radio too. We have a lot more luck actually in developing lower and middle income countries getting our messages out at a reasonable cost than we do here in the US. You can probably imagine.
Yeah, I mentioned earned media, creating a situation where you make the news rather than have to
Yeah.
buy the news.
Yeah. Yeah.
Augusto Boal, and I'm saying his name wrong, from Brazil,
Mhm.
Invisible Theater and
Oh yeah.
Theater of the Oppressed.
Uh-huh.
Emerging social media, TikTok. I wanted to share with you that Senator Kim Pate in Canada uses it to effect. She announces a situation that's of concern to her, and
Yeah.
then says, "I'm Senator Kim Pate. What do you think?" So it creates a two-way knowledge translation, if you will. And I was oh, and photo voice. Have you any experience with photo voice?
Yeah, absolutely. We've used it a lot. I mean, it's been around for quite a long time. And now with the advent of digital and people having phones, smartphones, it's a lot easier than it was back, you know, even 20 years ago. I read an article, but I can't remember. There was this article I read, and I'd have to go back and find it. Had some not so positive things to say about positive or photo voice, but I've actually had really great experiences with it. And for those of you that don't know what photo voice is, it's essentially a methodology where you're working with communities to help them tell their own stories on any topic through images and through narrative. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome, John. Thank you. Who else wants to stump me? I'm surprised my students aren't trying to stump me. They stump me a lot in class.
So I think, given the lack of further questions, which I think really is indicative here of a lucid presentation and good answers to the questions you've already been asked, I think we'll draw this to a close. We have a lot of seminars left this semester, 6, I think, so we hope to see some of you back each week besides the students in the seminar, not all of whom are happy students, by the way. I want to acknowledge that we have a couple of students from other grad programs. So thanks to everybody for coming today. Thank you, Lenette, for a very stimulating conversation, and Hallie, a great job moderating.
Thanks, everyone.
So we'll see you
You
all
all.
next week.
Bye.
Thank you.